Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my October wrap up for you guys. So I know I never did a September wrap up originally. I just didn't want to. And then I was kind of thinking maybe I would do them bi-monthly, but I was like, I read a lot of books every month, so I think that would just be a little too long if I put 2 months into one video. So I guess I kind of was just taking a break in September. I don't know. But basically every book I read in September, I read in vlogs. So you guys have all seen them. We'll be fine with that, a September wrap up. But I am here today to talk through all of the books that I read in the month of October. Obviously, I read so many amazing spooky books in October. I had such a fun time. Although honestly, I think like my two top favorite books of the month weren't spooky like at all, but we'll get there. We'll talk about that. But to give you guys some stats, because I finally have remembered to like write down stats so I could tell you them at the beginning of my wrap-ups, I read 20 books total. 16 of those were normal novels, and then I read 4 graphic novels. And then in total, I read 4,860 pages. So I'm quite happy with that. I feel like it was a really good reading month. 20 books is kind of crazy, but it was so much fun. So as for the order of this video, recently I have been organizing my wrap-ups by star rating, but actually very recently I've decided I'm gonna stop rating things. Just because I am very indecisive. I feel like I always want to go back and change my rating, but I'm like, damn, I've already like put it out there. So I'm giving up on rating things for the time being. So I have just kind of loosely based this off of like enjoyment. So we're gonna start with the ones that I enjoyed the least and work our way towards the ones that I enjoyed the most. So we're just gonna get into it. I feel like I've said enough in this intro, and let's go. Actually, the first 2 things I'm gonna start with are not really organized in that way because they are rereads, and if I like a book enough to reread it, you know it's gonna be pretty high, and like I just didn't want to put it with the other ones. So we're gonna start with my 2 rereads, and then we're gonna get into the rest of it. So this month I reread Fangs by Sarah Anderson, and obviously October is the perfect time to reread this graphic novel because it follows the love story between a vampire and a werewolf. It's so fun. I love the art style so much. Like, look at her trying to put this dress on, but she can't see herself in the mirror. Genius, honestly. And if you guys have not read Fangs, I highly recommend. It's a super short read. Perfect for October. Even though it's not October anymore, you should still read it because I'm pretty sure I read this for the first time in like May. So like, you'll enjoy it any time of year, but you gotta check it out. And then the other reread I did was The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. This is a bind up of like a bunch of Washington Irving's short stories, but The Legend of Sleepy Hollow itself is only about 30 pages, and it is one of my favorite spooky short stories. Now I know there are like definitely some things that you could say about it, criticisms that would be very valid, but the main reason I love this story is for the autumnal writing. It is so gorgeous, especially with like that kind of writing style that you normally get with classics. Kind of seeing that, but being applied to like fall foliage, spooky things, neighborhood haunts, all the good Halloween stuff. It is just perfect for this time of year, and I do want to reread it every year because I read it for the first time last year, loved it. So obviously I was like, gotta reread it this year as well. So if you guys are on the lookout for a short little classic short story with some really gorgeous writing, I would highly recommend. Those are my 2 rereads, and now we can get into the rest of the book. So like I said, we're gonna start off with the ones that I enjoyed the least. That's not to say I didn't enjoy them, but in the grand scheme of things, these are just the ones that I didn't like as much as the others, basically. The first one that I have here is a Goosebumps book. Now, this is the only Goosebumps book that I managed to read in the entire month of October, even though I spent the 3 months leading up to October collecting Goosebumps, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna read so many in October. I didn't. This is the only one. And to be honest, I didn't not read the others because I didn't enjoy this one that much, obviously because it's like the first one that we're talking about. I just like kind of forgot about them, to be honest. But I read this one, and like it was kind of fun. This is Stay Out of the Basement, and basically it's following these 2 kids whose mother, like, she has to go somewhere. So they're just in the house with their dad, who's acting real weird. He recently got let go from his job, and he's spending a lot of time down in the basement. And they kind of sneak down there one day. They see that there are some weird plants growing. Their dad is starting to act weird. They see him eating like plant fertilizer one day, which is definitely strange. So they're kind of just spending the book trying to figure out what's going on with that. I liked this one. It was fine, but I was like, they're just plants. Like, they're not that scary. I think I would enjoy the other Goosebumps books more. I probably should have started with number 1, which is, I think, Welcome to Dead House, which is a book that I think takes place in a spooky house. So like, I don't know why I didn't start with that one, but I also don't have it. So I should have tracked that one down and maybe started with that one. But I'm gonna find that and read it, and then I will read the rest of them at some point in time, probably next October. But I read this one. It was fine, but it did give me some good like 90s middle grade horror vibes, so there's that. Next up we have Bring Me Your Midnight by Rachel Griffin. Honestly, I am so sad that this one is so far down on the list. I just like did not care about this book in the slightest. This is following our main character, who is obviously a witch, as are all of Rachel Griffin's main characters. And she is in this arranged marriage situation with this human because they're trying to like broker some peace between the witches and the humans. And then there's also this whole bit where the witches like don't do dark magic anymore, but our main character meets this random guy who's like, that's not dark magic, that's just like the magic that you're supposed to do. Your witches just like don't want you to do that magic, so that's why they call it dark magic. There's this whole bit where she's learning forbidden magic. Obviously, she falls in love with this witch dude doing dark magic, and like, it's fine. Maybe that was a terrible description as to what this book was about, but like, it was just fine. I didn't really care for our main character. I really didn't care for the love interest, like for no particular reason. I just didn't like either of them. I didn't like them together, and I feel like both of Rachel Griffin's other books I have loved. They've been so fun. I really liked the romances in them. The love interests were like super endearing. Big fan of them. But like, this one just did absolutely nothing for me, and I felt very apathetic towards it. I will continue to pick up Rachel Griffin's other books for sure. This one just was not for me. Next up we have another book which I also am very sad about, and I also felt very apathetic towards, and that is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. I feel like so many people are loving this book right now. I just like am not one of those people. So this book follows our main character Effie, who is an architecture student in college at the beginning of this book, and she enters into this competition to redesign the like house, probably more of a mansion if I had to describe it, of her favorite author. So she goes there. There's also this dude named Preston who's there. Obviously, immediately they're rivals for, do you know what reason? Do you know why they are rivals? They are rivals because he checked out all of the books she wanted to check out at the library. I mean, there are also like some other reasons that like maybe those are valid, but that is her initial reason for not liking this guy, and I was like, okay. But don't get me wrong, I did end up really liking the relationship. I thought it was cute. I didn't really think their rivals to lovers arc was that well fleshed out. I was kind of like, I wouldn't call them rivals. They were kind of just two people who had dissenting opinions on this one thing, but I did really end up enjoying their relationship. I thought the way it progressed was just really nicely done, and they were kind of cute. But they're staying at this mansion. The whole time they're there, they're kind of digging into the backstory of Effie's favorite author, maybe finding some things Effie didn't want to know, and I just like did not care about the plot of this book in the slightest. However, the ambiance in this house was absolutely immaculate. It is a decrepit mansion falling to shambles. There's weird stuff going on. There's this basement full of water. Like, it's so odd, but I loved the house. I love anything with a creepy house. I just wish I really liked the plot of this one. It just wasn't for me, but just because it wasn't for me doesn't mean it's a bad book. Like, if this sounds interesting, you should totally check it out. I just didn't like it personally. Also, like, my main gripe with this book is that it is marketed as dark academia rivals to lovers. Like, that's how I've seen it marketed. Maybe I'm seeing some wrong things, but like, this book is not dark academia in my opinion. Now I know like the whole dark academia genre, subgenre, whatever, is very subjective, but I just didn't really think it was dark academia because it takes place at a college for like a chapter, and then the rest of it is taking place at this house. And I know that like our two main characters are students and they are very into their studies, but I just didn't really get the like dark academia typical themes or tropes or whatever. I just didn't personally find it to be very dark academia, but I would love to know, if you guys have read this, what do you think? Because I feel like I'm the only one that has that opinion. Like, I've talked to Cass about it. Well, she also feels the same way, but I want to know like what you guys think if you've read this. Is it dark academia? Am I just incorrect in my assumption of what dark academia is? I would love to know. I need some more opinions. Next up on this list, I do have one of my graphic novels, which is Garlic and the Witch by Brie Paulson. Now, this is the second book in like a little graphic novel duology, I think is what it's gonna be. I liked this one, but I did not like it anywhere near as much as I liked the first one, but we'll talk about that much later. This one is just like a continuation of everything that is happening in the first graphic novel, where you're following these like anthropomorphic vegetable people, and I just didn't really like the direction that this story went in. It kind of took all of like my favorite bits about the story, and then it kind of took them away. And I was like, okay, fine, that's fine. It was still really cute. I really love the art style. I love the characters, but I just didn't love how this one ended, but it was still really fun. Next up, we have the Spellbook of Katrina van Tassel. This one is honestly, I still don't know how I feel about this book, to be honest. This is a retelling of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, but you're following the love story between Katrina and Ichabod Crane. In this story, we are in Katrina's perspective, and one day this dude named Ichabod shows up in town. He's gonna be the new school teacher, and he ends up staying with her and her parents for a week before he like goes to live elsewhere, basically. And obviously they develop like a little bit of a romance, but it's pretty frowned upon that they're in this romance. Like, she's not telling her parents about it because they would not approve of Ichabod. They really want her to marry Brom Bones, but she does not want to marry Brom Bones. Okay? So her and Ichabod are having like all of these midnight rendezvous, things are happening. Like, it was kind of fun. Like, it was a little fun. I feel like this book had so much potential. The synopsis of it, I was very excited, but I just feel like it didn't really deliver on much of anything. Like, the romance was kind of fun. I liked the midnight rendezvous, but I just feel like more could have been done with it. I also feel like they were kind of infatuated with each other like instantly, and I was like, okay, maybe I need like a little bit more build up there. And as the story progressed, I was just like, what's going on? Although at some point this does turn into like a missing person mystery kind of thing, because on Halloween, Ichabod goes missing. So like the second half of this book is kind of trying to figure out what's going on with that. It was a fun time. I was kind of into it. Like, I had to know what was gonna happen next. I pretty much read it like all in one go. But like when I got to the end, I was like, oh, okay. That happened. So if you really like The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, I would recommend checking it out, because it is really interesting to see what Alyssa Palombo does with the story and how she expands upon it, but it's not amazing. Next up, we are kind of moving into the books that I did really like. So those, like, they were fine. I just don't know about those. But the next ones, I really liked all of these ones coming up. So first up, we have Dark Waters by Catherine Arden. This is the third book in the Small Spaces series. I love the Small Spaces series. I think it's so fun. It is a middle grade horror series following this group of 3 friends as they're just dealing with these random paranormal things that are being thrown at them. In the first one, there's this creepy scarecrow coming after them. In the second one, it deals more with like ghosts. And in this one, they end up going to this little island in the middle of Lake Champlain, and there's this weird sea monster coming after them, basically. And it's just a really fun time. Like, I don't have a ton to say about it, but the ending of this book, I am so intrigued. And to be honest, I did not want to pick up the 4th book in this series because it deals with clowns, and like, I'm not scared of clowns, but like, as a villain, I'm like, I don't care. I read it, and I was like, the clown is doing nothing for me. So maybe I'm just assuming that I don't like clowns in horror. I don't know, but this one, it left off on a cliffhanger, which I was not expecting. Like, that really came out of the blue. So now I have to pick up the 4th one. I will probably read it next year, because I've kind of been reading these one per year. Yeah, because I read the first one in 2021, second one last year, this one this year. So I'll probably pick up whatever the 4th one is next year, because I really want to know what's gonna happen. Like, she really got me with this cliffhanger. Next up, we have my Patreon buddy read for October, which was One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. This one, I just don't know how I feel about this one still, because there are so many elements to this book that I really liked. I really liked the romance. I really liked the way it developed. I don't think I'm going to ever think about Raven again, to be honest. But I liked it. I thought it was fun. There were some cute moments. I feel like I kind of wanted a little more build up in there, but I could work with it. I really liked the magic system because it was based on this deck of cards and kind of learning about the cards, what they can do, what they do to the people that use them. I liked that. I liked the writing. I feel like it sets an ambiance pretty well. although I did not care for the plot of this book at all. But this book is following our main character Elspeth, who was infected when she was a child, and basically all of the children that get infected in this little area called Blunder, they get these weird magical abilities, and I don't know if it's due to the infection or because she was using one of the cards, but she ends up getting this monster inside her head called the Nightmare, and he's kind of been in there for like 11 years. And this book kind of follows her as she meets this group of people who really want to collect all of these cards, because when you collect the cards, you can do this really helpful thing. I don't know if telling you what this really helpful thing is a spoiler or not, but that's kind of it. She ends up helping them out using her powers kind of thing. She meets the love interest Raven. That's kind of the plot of this book. I just did not care for the plot. I did not think it was that interesting, honestly. But there are so many individual parts of this book that I really liked, so I'm very conflicted on my feelings towards this book. However, I do think I want to pick up the second book in this series, which just came out. It's called Two Twisted Crowns. I am interested enough to continue the series. Like, it kind of got me at the very end where I was like, kind of want to know what's going to happen here. So I am excited to check out the second book and see how it compares to this one. Next up, we have What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This is a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. I read The Fall of the House of Usher over the summer. I kind of liked it. It's not my favorite Poe story that I've read. To be fair, I have not read that many Poe stories, but it was fine. But this book had been on my radar for a while, and I was like, well, now that I've read The Fall of the House of Usher, I should read this one. Although I don't really think you need to have read The Fall of the House of Usher to read this book, but I think it's kind of interesting to like compare them if you have read both of them. This is following our main character Alex Easton, who is a retired non-binary soldier. So they come to Usher House and they start to notice some weird things. Even on the way there, they see these weird hairs that are looking a little worse for wear. They're limping everywhere, very creepy. There's all these mushrooms. Also on the way to the house, they meet this mycologist whose name is Eugenia Potter, and I want nothing more in life than to be a mycologist, just like studying mushrooms every day. You know what I'm saying? Like just walking around, drawing some mushrooms, learning about fungi. It sounds like a good time, to be honest. And I love any character in any story that is a naturalist of any sort. Like, so many of my favorite characters are naturalists. So when I heard that Eugenia was a mycologist, I was like, I already love this. Thank you. So there were so many parts of this book that I really enjoyed. Obviously, I really liked the characters because even aside from Alex and Eugenia, there are a couple of other characters that are very interesting to learn about. And I feel like the characters is why I really enjoyed this story. The plot was fine. There were definitely some creepy elements, but it was really the characters that sold it for me. I think I will continue this series as well because I think there's a second one that either just came out or is coming out soon. I'm not sure, but I do want to check that out. So there's What Moves the Dead. Okay, next up we have House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. This one, it took me a minute to fully get into this story. I think at first I wasn't super convinced that I was going to love it, but once I hit the 100-page mark, my interest, it just increased exponentially, and I really ended up enjoying this. This is following Iris, who when she was, maybe she was 5 or something, her and 2 of her sisters went missing for a month until mysteriously one day they kind of just showed back up. But when they got back, they were acting really weird, their hair turned white, their pupils were black, and nobody could figure out what happened to them. So this book is kind of following them as they start to learn more about what happened to them. But in the current timeline, her sister Gray goes missing, so she kind of teams up with her other sister Vivi. As they try to figure out what happened, Gray has kind of left some clues behind for them that they're trying to work through. And the entirety of this book is kind of just them figuring out what exactly happened to them when they disappeared all those years ago. It was very weird and bizarre. There's a lot of nature horror used in this book. So there are bugs coming out of people's skin and flowers growing out of their arms, which the juxtaposition between these beautiful flowers and them growing out of people. I was like, that's really interesting. Gross, but interesting. And I really just liked Crystal Sutherland's writing, and I'm glad that I picked this one up. Next up, we have a book that I'm going to be completely honest, I do not remember a ton about. And that would be my Patreon buddy read for September. I ended up reading this in the very beginning of October because I the end of September was the whole time. I just ran out of time to read it, so I read it in the beginning of October, but this was a very long time ago. I think I finished this on like October 1st. So I don't remember a ton about it aside from the fact that I really liked it. But from what I do remember about this book, I really liked how Rebecca Ross wrote the relationships in this book, because first you have Jack and Adira, I think, who were kind of like childhood, not really rivals, but like they didn't really like each other when they were children. But now that Jack is back and he's kind of reconnecting with Adira, their relationship was so cute. And then kind of the other relationship that we're following in this book is Sidra and Torin. Torin's wife Danella died a few years ago, so he remarried Sidra and she's kind of taking care of his daughter Maisie. And I think they were both under the impression at first that he kind of just needed somebody to take care of his child. But throughout this book, you kind of see them start to really connect and grow closer, and I really enjoyed their relationship as well. But aside from that, I do not remember anything about this book, so we are just casually going to move on. This next book I read very recently, and that is My Roommate is a Vampire by Jenna Levine. I looked up the Goodreads rating for this, and I had no clue it was like a 3.5. Which is very low for Goodreads, might I add, but I thought this book was super fun. Like, basically this is following our main character Cassie, who is getting evicted from her apartment. She needs somewhere to live that's cheap. So on Craigslist, she sees that there's this apartment, this like really nice apartment that is being like rented for $200 a month, and she's kind of like, it seems kind of sus, but I'm gonna go talk to this dude anyway. And that's how she meets our other main character, Frederick, who, no spoilers or anything, but he might be a vampire. And she moves in, she starts to notice like he's a little weird. She finds a blood bag in the fridge at one point, and things kind of go from there. He kind of explains to her that, like, you know, he's a vampire, he needs help figuring out the modern world, and that's why he was looking for a roommate. So Cassie kind of steps in, teaches him all about the modern world. Obviously, a romance ensues. I thought it was really fun. It's nothing groundbreaking, but I thought it was a pretty good time. It's honestly really ridiculous, but like in the best possible way. It's just a rom-com featuring a vampire. And honestly, that's everything that I could have possibly needed. Also really liked Frederick as a love interest because he is from like the 1700s. So he's very chivalrous. Just the way that he treats our main character is so lovely. He honestly kind of reads a little bit like a historical romance love interest, but in a modern setting. And that just like that blend is everything I could have needed. So it was just a really good time. Okay, now we are kind of moving into the last 6 books that I have here. And these are kind of like my top 6 books for the month. I loved all of these, to be honest. The first one that we have here is Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. Honestly, it's about time I got to reading this book. I've been wanting to read this book for such a long time. Obviously, it is a staple vampire book, and I'm so glad that I finally decided to pick it up. This book is following our main character, Louis, as he is just telling a reporter the story of his life and what it was like being a vampire. My only critique of this book is that it is really slow, but I think also it was kind of to my detriment that I was trying to read this for Vampathon, so I tried to read it in 2 days. And I did, but I feel like Anne Rice, maybe not the kind of author I should try and read in 2 days. Obviously, I still really liked it. It didn't like hinder my enjoyment of it, but I just don't think that was my best idea. But it was just so interesting to learn about Anne Rice's vampires. I feel like she has very like sophisticated vampires almost. Like she's always poking fun at like all of the typical vampire like things, like, you know, seeing yourself in mirrors, stakes through the heart, garlic, what is it, the other one? Crucifixes, like looking at a crucifix. Like, they can do all that stuff. They're kind of just, you know, normal people who drink blood and can't go out in sunlight. Also, they sleep in coffins, and I do love a good vampire story where they sleep in coffins. It's just so interesting. I really liked hearing the story of Louis' life and all of the relationships that he has had throughout his journey of being a vampire. It's very interesting how they're explored, because you have Lestat, who is the vampire that turned him, and he is a toxic man. I don't like him. Although, one of you guys told me that if I read the second book, which is The Vampire Lestat, I would start to like him. So like, I don't know what that's about, and I'm definitely intrigued. I wanted to continue the series anyway, but now I'm really gonna have to continue the series to see what's up with that. So you have Lestat, and then you also have Claudia, who was turned into a vampire at the age of 5. So obviously her body like remains as a 5-year-old, but she ages mentally. And like the whole dynamic with that is really interesting. I don't know, uncomfortable maybe is a better word, but it's really interesting to see how all of that is explored. So I really like this one, and I'm really excited to continue the series. Next up we have Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. This mainly is so far up on this list because I love the sentient house in this book. I've said it so many times, but I love books with sentient houses, especially this one because it's like not a malevolent sentient house, it's kind of on our main character's side. And I love that kind of subversion of that typical trope. But this is following our main character Opal, who gets this job working at Starling House for this weird dude named, what is his name? Alistair? No, what is his name? Arthur, not Alistair. I think at some point in the book somebody is trying to remember what his name is, and they also say Alistair first, so a natural conclusion, I guess. She gets a job working at Starling House, which is currently where Arthur Starling lives, and they start this, like, you know, interesting relationship that develops throughout the rest of the book. It was just really spooky in parts. I really liked the character exploration that went on in it. I just really liked so many aspects to this book, and if you want a good book about a sentient house, I'd recommend. Next up, I do have two graphic novels that I want to talk about. The first one being or I guess maybe this one's a comic, I'm not sure. But the first one is Over the Garden Wall Distillatoria. This is a graphic novel, comic, whatever it is, set in the Over the Garden Wall, whatever. It follows like the main characters from the show. So you have Wirt, Greg, and Beatrice. And it basically reads like another episode of the show. Like, it is the exact same feeling, same vibe, same art style, and I loved it so much because I love Over the Garden Wall. I think it's just one of my favorite shows in general now. Normally I would say it's like, oh, my favorite show for fall, but like I just love it so much. I would probably watch it any time of year. So being able to almost experience like a new episode of it is so fun because the show itself is only 8 episodes long. So being able to get any more content out of it, I was so excited and I really enjoyed it. And then the other graphic novel that I do want to talk about is Garlic and the Vampire. This is one of my new favorite graphic novels. It is so freaking cute. Basically, this is following these anthropomorphic vegetables, as I said earlier when I was talking about the second one. But in this one, they kind of notice that there is this house on the hill and they're noticing like some smoke, like maybe the fireplace is going or whatever. And all these vegetables are very worried. They're like, what if a vampire moved in? He's gonna come down and eat everybody in the village. Somebody needs to go check it out. And obviously our main character, Garlic, is the perfect person, vegetable thing for the mission. So she goes to this house, she meets the vampire, and I don't want to say anything else because it's just so cute. Like, if this looks like something you would like, if you like Over the Garden Wall, you should pick this up. Like, it's just the perfect fall graphic novel. I love the art style. I love the characters. It's adorable, frankly. Okay, and then moving on into these last two books, I am so excited to talk about these, obviously, because they are my top 2 favorite books of the month. So the first one that I have here is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson, and this is actually my very first sci-fi book I believe I have ever read. I've been wanting to try out sci-fi for such a long time. I've just always been very intimidated by the genre because I just never knew if I was going to like it. So when I initially picked this up, I was like, maybe I should try out some sci-fi from an author that I've read from before because I know Brandon Sanderson, he will not lead me astray. And then me and Cass decided to make this the Wyverns and Words book club pick for October, and I was like, okay, perfect. Now I actually have an excuse to read it. And I ended up really enjoying this one. It was so much fun. So this book is following our main character Spencer, who wants nothing more than to be a pilot, but 10 years ago her dad, who was also a pilot, some things happened in a battle he was in and he ended up dying, but he was also branded a coward. So Spencer and her mom and grandma have kind of been dealing with that title for a really long time, and it has even followed her into flight school. And originally, like, they weren't gonna let her in because her dad was branded a coward, but like obviously through some turn of events, she does end up getting in. And this book follows her and her experience of going through flight school. There are these weird aliens on this planet that they're fighting called the Krell, and you're kind of always seeing them get into skirmishes with these aliens. And honestly, it was just so cool. I feel like Brandon Sanderson really knows how to write an action sequence. So seeing that, but like they're in spaceships, I was like, that's so sick. I loved it. I also really liked the character Spencer at first. I was like, I don't know about you, but like that's kind of the point. And throughout the book you kind of see her grow as a person and kind of develop into this really cool pilot. Also, kind of the other main plot of this book is that Spencer finds this abandoned ship and she ends up getting it to turn on, and turns out it's a sentient ship. His name is Mbot. Really like what he adds to the story, and her friend Raj kind of throughout the story work on getting Mbot to like be able to fly again. So seeing that was really fun as well. And I feel like, honestly, I have unlocked a new genre. I definitely want to read more sci-fi, definitely want to finish this series. I have already bought the second and third book, so I'm really excited for those to get here. And honestly, I'm just surprised by how much I ended up enjoying this book. Only thing is with this book, it is a little juvenile at some points, but like that's honestly not a very valid complaint, seeing as it is written for young adults, and like I'm technically not in that age range. So like not a valid complaint on the book, but like kind of just something if you want to pick this up that you might keep in mind. So there's that. I really liked Skyward. And then finally we have come to my top favorite book of the month, and that is none other than Scorched Roses by Carissa Broadbent. I read The Serpent and the Wings of Night back in June. I liked it, but I didn't love it. But this one, obviously I loved. This is following our main character Lilith, who is a healer, and currently her village is having this like outbreak, plague thing. I don't know if they call it a plague. There's a sickness in her village. And as a healer, obviously, she wants to figure out how to cure this sickness, but she wants to experiment using vampire blood. So in the beginning of this book, you see her meeting our other main character, Vale, who is a vampire, and she's like, give me some of your blood. And he's like, no. But obviously they end up striking this deal where every month she is going to bring him one of these like mystical fancy roses or whatever. Like he doesn't really know what they do, but he is intrigued in return for some of his blood. And the book is kind of told like in vignettes of their relationship, like every month when she comes to bring him the rose and she gets the blood, and we kind of see their relationship develop through that. At some point in time they start writing to each other like little letters, and I was like, any romance book that includes them writing letters to each other, thank you. I love that so much. And I loved their relationship so much. I feel like this was the perfect kind of story to put in a novella. And just the way that Carissa Broadbent was able to like develop their relationship in such a short time and make me like root for them. It was, oh my god, it was so good. And I'm so excited to pick up the second book in the night, is it called the Nightborn Duet? I know they're not main characters, but I know they show up in the Ashes and the Starkers King, so I'm like, hello, thank you, I need to read that right now. So I'm so excited about that. And it was so good. I just like, just thinking about them, it's, yeah, I'm gonna stop making random, I don't know, non-helpful comments about it. It's just really good. So we have come to the end of this video. I've been filming for so long, but I'd say it was a very successful reading month. I got to some really fun books, really enjoyed mostly all of them. So I hope you guys also had a really good reading month. Obviously, I would love to know down below, what are some books you read this month? I'd love to know your favorite, or if you're feeling shady, I would also love to know your least favorite book. Obviously, we all know my least favorite book because I started with it, but I would love to know what yours were. Also, actually, before we go, I did want to thank everybody over on my Patreon. If you guys are ever looking for more content from me, we do some fun stuff over there. We also do a monthly buddy read. This month, I'm really excited because we are going to be reading Powerless by, is it Lauren Roberts, I think? I've seen this book everywhere, so I'm really excited about it. So if you want to come and join us, you totally can, and that would be linked down below. But now I think that's everything that I was going to tell you. So I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're all having an amazing November so far, and I'll see you guys in my next video.